London Mayor Sadiq Khan says carrying a small amount of cannabis should not be illegal. A report he commissioned found that policing this Class B drug disproportionately targets ethnic communities and damages police relations. The Home Office, however, says it has no plans to reclassify cannabis. In a moment, we'll speak to Steve Rolls, Senior Policy Analyst for Transform Drug Policy Foundation. But first, David Sidwick, Conservative Police and Crime Commissioner for Dorset. David, good afternoon to you, sir.
Good afternoon, Ian.
Every few months or every year or so, this debate comes around, doesn't it? It comes around in different forms and for different reasons. We know there's medicalised arguments about cannabis. Let's park that. It's perhaps a different discussion altogether. And Sadiq Khan has an issue around community relations, which may or may not be correct. I don't know. But certainly the one thing we can agree on, David, is that the discussion around it is not new. It's probably not going to change. It's not going to go away. And as we know, the Home Office are not going to reclassify cannabis. Are they right?
No, they're wrong, actually. And I'll tell you why. They should reclassify it as a Class A drug. Now, I know that is counterintuitive, and that is the exact opposite of what Mr. Khan is asking for. But I think that there is some really good evidence now. Since 2016, there has been more evidence coming out of those areas which have decriminalised or legalised. And when you look at that and you look at the epidemiology, you can see birth defects, cancer, other issues are increased in those areas where it has been decriminalised. And there is a really good rationale and mode of action as to why this should be the case. So I am actually suggesting that people look at a reference book, Epidemiology of Cannabis by Stuart Rees and Gary Kenneth House. They have spent literally years and papers after papers looking at this from an epidemiological point of view. Cannabis is a genotoxin. And the fact that it hasn't come out and hasn't been talked about in this manner is a failure of our drug awareness and education.
There, of course, that view has been around and supported by many, of course, David. But, of course, there's other experts in the medical world, in the science world, that say, no, hang on a sec, yes, of course, there are going to be issues surrounding side effects and a negative experience of using cannabis. But the vast majority of experiences actually aren't that at all, and therefore it's a total waste of time and money policing something that, frankly, people do socially. They don't harm anybody. It's not like alcohol, which is perfectly legal, that harms lots of people. Nobody really dies just because they smoked a couple of spliffs here and there. So what's the big deal? And throwing some anecdotal evidence from your point of view, David, is powerful and relevant, but it's not an overriding factor or a reality.
So, Ian, I'll pick you up on the word anecdotal evidence. These papers have been published in places like Science, Nature, the New England Journal of Medicine, the biggest and most important medical journals in the world. This is not anecdotal evidence. This is true, proper science. It's been developed and has come forward since about 2016. So this is new data. And this has only been able to be done since you've been able to look at large areas which have decriminalised versus areas which haven't. So it's not anecdotal.
Would your...
I think the point is...
Go on.
I think the point is this, is when you ask people, and I ask my residents a lot, I ask them what they wanted to see and what they wanted addressed. They wanted drug dealing addressed. And they didn't differentiate. They didn't differentiate between drug dealing for cocaine or drug dealing for cannabis. They wanted drug dealing addressed, and they wanted the harm that they saw happening with it. I have apartment blocks where people say to me, we don't want the stench of cannabis in our apartment block. We want this addressed. Why isn't it being addressed? So I think to go the other way, absolutely the other way, and to actually make it more available to people, all it will do is it will give heart to those people who want to sell more drugs. And I'll tell you something else. This was tried. In Lambeth in 2014, cannabis was decriminalised, and they saw Class A drugs increase by 40 to 100%. So I'm sorry, I don't understand the direction of travel from Mr. Khan. The direction should absolutely be in the opposite.
Just a final point, David. When you speak to, you're the Police and Crime Commissioner for Dorset, when you speak to serving officers in your county, which you do on a pretty much a daily basis, do none of them say to you, look, Commissioner, this is a waste of our time. You know, we're spending God knows how long at the police station, someone who's got what they call a bit of personal on them, and it's taking up hours of our time and resources. It's expensive and it's futile and takes us nowhere. What's your answer to them?
Well, they haven't said that to me. And in fact, I have taken them through all the data that I talked to you about. I presented to the chief officers, I've presented to other PCCs about this. And at no stage has anybody said to me, we're not going to police cannabis. The issue is the resources to do so. And therefore, what isn't working is the cannabis warning, which was brought in, funny enough, about the same time in 2014. So what it needs is it needs diversion. The problem, Ian, is that we have only ever tried to do one thing, either enforce or not enforce at all. What this needs is three things. It needs tough enforcement, it needs proper treatment and recovery, and it needs, above all, prevention. And that is around education and awareness. Okay. And that isn't what's happening at the moment. And that's why I'm yammering at the Home Office as much as possible to say, invest in prevention, invest in telling people about the true harm of all the drugs. We've seen ketamine, for example, over the last couple of months. We've seen ketamine come to the fore. That bladder issue has been known about for years. I knew about it when I was working in the drug industry. So what we need is we need a classification which doesn't just take into account acute harm, as it does, but also chronic harm. And I would categorize cannabis in the same direction as ketamine in that regard.
David, a very thorough response. Great to have you on, sir. We will speak again, I'm sure. David Sidwick is the Conservative Police and Crime Commissioner for Dorset.